Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he is open to direct negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul this Thursday, quote, without preconditions. Speaking in an early morning press conference at the Kremlin, Putin did not agree to a 30-day ceasefire to take effect on Monday. That was the demand from the leaders of Germany, Poland, France and the UK, who travelled to Kyiv for talks with President Zelenskyy, and also spoke to Donald Trump by phone in Washington. The allies threatened Russia with increased sanctions if it failed to agree to the truce. For more on this now, I'm joined by DW reporter Matthew Manion. Matthew, quite an ultimatum there that President Putin appears to have rejected already. What more did he have to say?
Well, gathered journalists had waited for more than an hour for Vladimir Putin to turn up to make this statement. They didn't know what he was going to say, and he didn't turn up to nearly just before 2 a.m. local time in the morning. And perhaps unsurprisingly, there was no direct response to that ultimatum from Kyiv and those European allies you mentioned. They had earlier pressed Russia for that 30-day ceasefire to start on Monday. They said that otherwise Russia would face massive new sanctions and new weapons deliveries to Ukraine. What we got instead from Vladimir Putin was a counter-proposal, an offer not for a ceasefire, but for direct talks between Moscow and Kyiv. He said these talks could take place in the Turkish city of Istanbul, starting as early as this coming Thursday, that's May the 15th. Now, he called this a resumption of negotiations started in 2022 in Istanbul, where Russian and Ukrainian negotiators held direct talks in the first weeks of the conflict, but failed to agree a halt to the fighting. Putin said he would speak to the Turkish president later on Sunday about facilitating these talks. And it's really not clear if Turkey was aware of this proposal before it was made by President Putin. I will tell you a little bit more about what Putin had to say, and I quote, he said, "We are committed to serious negotiations with Ukraine. Their purpose is to eliminate the root causes of the conflict, to establish a long-term lasting peace. We do not rule out that during these negotiations it will be possible to agree on some new truce, a new ceasefire." And he said the decision is now up to the Ukrainian authorities and their curators, who are guided, he said, it seems, by their personal political ambitions and not by their interests of their peoples.
You've already mentioned that there hasn't been a response from Kyiv yet, but have we heard from any of Kyiv's allies?
We've had nothing so far, but it will now be interesting to see just how President Zelenskyy and those European allies react. Will they now accept this new proposal or double down their demands of a ceasefire to start on Monday? A ceasefire demand that was also backed by US President Donald Trump, who they informed over telephone after those talks. They will no doubt see this as more the same, though, from President Putin, more delaying tactics as they see it from a man whose commitment to peace they have questioned. Now, Putin's reference to the root causes of the Ukraine conflict is a phrase we've heard before from Russia. They've used it repeatedly when arguing that it was forced to go to war to prevent the prospect of Ukraine joining NATO. Now, Ukraine and its Western allies often say this was a false pretext, what they call an imperial-style invasion. Now, of particular interest will be just how the US and President Donald Trump reacts now to this Putin proposal. The Trump administration has been increasingly frustrated that it's not been able to get any progress over any kind of peace talks. And it did call for a 30-day truce and negotiations take place in March. Ukraine agreed. Russia, though, at that time asked for several preconditions. And it's hard to see what's changed this time.
Thank you for bringing us all of that background. That's DW reporter Matthew Manion.